June 19, 2003, Brian Waters pulls his truck into the gravel driveway of Burnt House Farm, a remote property tucked into the Cheshire countryside near Nantwich. He's here to check on his cannabis crop, a routine visit, nothing unusual. But something is wrong. An unfamiliar horsebox sits parked in the yard, its trailer doors slightly ajar. Inside the farmhouse, 6 masked men have already taken their first victim. They've been waiting for hours, systematically preparing the cowshed, laying out tools, testing bindings. Every detail has been rehearsed. The surveillance operation that led them here took 9 days. The torture they're about to inflict will last 3 hours. This will become one of the most methodically brutal gangland murders in British criminal history. But the story doesn't begin here. It begins 2 years earlier, in the summer of 2001, with £20,000 that vanished at an Amsterdam port, and a debt Brian Waters could never repay. Welcome to UK True Crime Files. Brian Waters wasn't born into criminality. He was a father, a former construction worker whose career ended abruptly after a series of workplace injuries left him unable to continue heavy labor. By the late 1990s, with limited options and mounting bills, he drifted into the cannabis trade. Small scale at first, then expanding. By 1998, he was running his own cultivation plot in the Netherlands, making regular cross-border runs to supply UK buyers. It was through this world that Brian met John Wilson. Wilson was 54 years old in 2001, a Glossop-based crime boss with a reputation built on fear and meticulous control. He ran a network of cannabis smuggling operations across the Netherlands and Britain, hiring couriers, brokers and enforcers to maintain the flow. Brian became one of those couriers, reliable, experienced, trusted to move money and product across borders. Then came the summer of 2002. Brian was stopped at Amsterdam customs carrying £20,000 in cash. Not his money, John Wilson's money. The funds were seized on the spot. Brian had no recourse, no legal avenue to reclaim what was never officially his. He returned to the UK empty-handed and the debt transferred to him. Wilson expected repayment. Brian couldn't deliver. Months passed. Phone calls went unanswered. Wilson's patience evaporated. This wasn't just about £20,000 anymore. In criminal circles, reputation is currency. If one courier could walk away from a debt without consequence, Wilson's entire operation would collapse under the weight of defiance. By late 2002, rumors began circulating. Brian Waters and his business partner, Mujahed Majid, were running a secret cannabis farm somewhere in Cheshire. For Wilson, the farm represented more than lost money. It was proof Brian was still operating and doing so without settling his accounts. Wilson didn't just want repayment, he wanted a message sent. John Wilson needed professionals. Not street thugs or opportunistic muscle, but men who could operate in plain sight, who understood surveillance, who could infiltrate communities without raising suspicion. He found them in Christopher Guestmore Jr. and James Raven, cousins with an unsettling combination of skills. Both men had worked as undercover researchers for British television. Guestmore Jr. had contributed to BBC and Channel 4 documentaries investigating Cheshire's criminal underworld, embedding himself within drug networks to gather footage and testimony. On paper, they were investigators exposing crime. In reality, they were men with violent criminal pasts who'd learned how to exploit access, trust, and information. Their day rate? Up to £500. One job allegedly netted them over £50,000. Wilson hired them in early June 2003 with a single objective: locate Brian Waters' hidden farm. June 10, 2003. Guestmore Jr. and Raven begin surveillance at Brian's family home in Nantwich. They wait. Hours pass. Then Brian's son, Gavin, leaves the property in his car. The cousins follow at a distance, maintaining visual contact through winding Cheshire backroads. Gavin leads them directly to Burnt House Farm, a sprawling, isolated property surrounded by fields, invisible from main roads. Over the following days, they return repeatedly. They log arrival times, photograph vehicles, map entry points, document routines. They confirm Brian visits regularly. They identify Suleiman Razak, son of Brian's business partner, who handles day-to-day farm maintenance. By June 18th, they've assembled a 6-man crew, including Otis Matthews and David Moran. A stolen horsebox is sourced to transport tools and personnel without suspicion. By June 19th, the surveillance phase is complete. The trap is set. 6 masked men wait inside Burnt House Farm, weapons laid out in the cowshed, ropes already tied to overhead beams. The attack is about to begin. If methodical case coverage that connects unusual details like these matters to you, 2 BBC researchers turned gangland enforcers, a quick subscribe ensures we can keep examining stories most channels won't touch. More on that research background after this. Morning of June 19, 2003. The 6 masked men force entry to Burnt House Farm in the early hours, moving through rooms with practiced efficiency. They're not looting. They're not searching for drugs or cash. They're waiting. The first person through the door isn't Brian Waters. It's Suleiman Razak, arriving around mid-morning for routine maintenance work on the cannabis crop. He barely registers the unfamiliar horsebox in the yard before hands grab him from behind. He's dragged across the property to the cowshed, a converted outbuilding now serving as an interrogation chamber. The questions begin immediately. Where's the money? Where's Brian hiding the cash? Razak doesn't know. He's not involved in the financial side of the operation. He's a laborer, nothing more. His answers don't satisfy them. A rope is tied around his ankles and hoisted over an overhead beam. Razak is suspended upside down, blood rushing to his head, vision blurring. A green container filled with filthy water is placed beneath him. His head is plunged in repeatedly, pulled out just before unconsciousness, then submerged again. High-voltage shocks course through his body from a makeshift electrical device. Canes strike his back, leaving deep tramline bruising. Phosphoric acid, used in cannabis cultivation, is poured onto his exposed skin, burning through layers of tissue. A staple gun fires into his flesh, once, twice, multiple times. He's bound to a chair with duct tape. The beating continues. By 1 p.m., Suleiman Razak is barely conscious, slumped in restraints, blood pooling beneath the chair, and Brian Waters' truck is pulling into the driveway. Brian notices the horsebox immediately. It's unfamiliar, out of place. Suspicious, but not alarming enough to turn around. He steps out of his truck and walks toward the farmhouse. The moment he crosses the threshold, he understands. He tries to flee. Too late. Hands drag him backward, pulling him toward the cowshed, where Suleiman Razak hangs barely conscious. What follows is systematic, methodical, and unspeakably brutal. Canes strike Brian's body repeatedly, fracturing ribs with each blow. His head is forced into the same container of filthy water used on Razak, held under until his lungs burn. High-voltage shocks are applied to his skin. He's hoisted upside down by his ankles, suspended from the beam, blood flooding his skull. Staples are fired into his flesh. A plastic bag is placed over his head and briefly set alight before being extinguished. The pain is beyond comprehension. Then comes the worst moment. An iron bar is forced into Brian's rectum, pushed so far it strikes the base of his spine. Pathologists would later confirm the internal damage was catastrophic. His screams echo across the empty farm. No one hears them. Later that afternoon, Brian's son Gavin and daughter Natalie arrive at the farm for a planned visit. The gang is waiting. Gavin is grabbed immediately, a rope wrapped around his neck, choking him until he's near unconsciousness. A gun is shoved into Natalie's mouth. Threats are made. Both can see their father, broken, blood-soaked, dying. At one point, Brian begs them to loosen his restraints. His voice is weak, desperate. "I can't breathe." Someone loosens the tape. It doesn't matter. The damage is already done. In front of his children, Brian Waters dies. His body is dragged to the milking parlor and dumped on the concrete floor. Meanwhile, 2 members of the gang take Brian's truck and drive to the family home in Nantwich. They force entry, confront his wife Julie, search the property for hidden cash. They find nothing. They kidnap her, drive her back to Burnt House Farm, and deliver her into the same nightmare her children are trapped in. David Moran had been stationed outside as a lookout, positioned at the property perimeter to watch for approaching vehicles or witnesses. But as the hours dragged on and the violence inside escalated beyond anything he'd anticipated, Moran made a decision that would dismantle the entire operation. He dialed 999. But David Moran didn't confess. He posed as a passing motorist who'd just witnessed suspicious activity at Burnt House Farm. Men in masks, sounds of a struggle, possible violence. His voice was calm, detached, designed to create distance between himself and the carnage unfolding inside. The call was logged at approximately 4 p.m. Police arrived within minutes. Cheshire constabulary officers pulled into the farm driveway to find chaos. Doors hanging open, bloodstains visible through windows, muffled sounds coming from the cowshed. The gang inside heard the sirens. Panic set in. Men scattered across surrounding fields, abandoning everything. Gloves still on, balaclavas hanging from rafters, the stolen horsebox sitting in full view. There was no time to clean up, no time to erase evidence. James Raven was detained nearby, caught attempting to flee through a hedgerow. The others vanished into the countryside, disappearing into networks of rural lanes and safe houses. Inside the farm, officers found Suleiman Razak alive but barely, bound, burned, beaten unconscious. In the milking parlor, they found Brian Waters' body. The post-mortem examination would later reveal 123 external injuries. Tramline bruising from repeated caning, strangulation marks, 26 fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, severe internal tearing to the anus and rectum, confirming the iron bar assault, chemical burns from phosphoric acid, and staple wounds across his torso. Cause of death: cumulative trauma from sustained torture. Suleiman Razak survived, but would carry life-altering physical injuries and psychological scars for the rest of his life. The walls were closing in on John Wilson's network. Within 48 hours, one of the masterminds would be caught on airport CCTV, using a fake passport. For those in Cheshire or the Nantwich area who remember June 2003 or the 16-year hunt for Christopher Guestmore Jr., we'd value your perspective in the comments below, shared respectfully. Your local knowledge often adds context court records can't. 2 days after Brian Waters' murder, Christopher Guestmore Jr. appeared on CCTV at a British airport. He was accompanied by his girlfriend, travelling under a false identity, Andrew Christopher Lamb. The passport was professionally forged, complete with authentication stamps and biographical details designed to withstand cursory inspection. Border officials waved him through. He boarded a flight to Spain. Intelligence reports later placed him in Malaga, allegedly living in relative comfort, using rotating aliases embedded within expatriate communities where British fugitives often disappeared. For 16 years he remained beyond reach. Back in Cheshire, arrests accelerated. John Wilson, Otis Matthews, and James Raven were charged with the murder of Brian Waters and the attempted murder of Suleiman Razak. David Moran, the lookout who'd made the 999 call, was charged with lesser offences and offered reduced sentencing in exchange for testimony. September 2004, the trials began at Chester Crown Court. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA recovered from gloves and balaclavas matched Wilson, Raven, and Matthews. Forensic analysis tied them to the cowshed, the milking parlor, the restraints used on Brian and Suleiman. Testimony from Razak, Gavin Waters, Natalie Waters, and Julie Waters painted a detailed timeline of the attack. The defense offered no credible alternative narrative. John Wilson and James Raven were found guilty on both counts, murder and attempted murder. Sentencing: life imprisonment with minimum terms of 24 years before eligibility for parole. Otis Matthews' first trial ended with a hung jury. One juror could not reach consensus. A retrial was ordered. 2006, Matthews was found guilty. Life imprisonment, 24-year minimum, but the case remained incomplete. 3 members of the 6-man gang were never identified. The convicted men claimed ignorance. They didn't know the others' real names, couldn't provide descriptions beyond masked figures, insisted they'd been hired through intermediaries. Investigators doubted these claims but lacked evidence to disprove them. For the Waters family, justice felt hollow. Brian was dead, Suleiman was permanently disabled, and one of the architects of the surveillance operation that made it all possible, Christopher Guestmore Jr., was living freely in Spain. 16 years passed. 2019, a breakthrough. Joint intelligence operations between Cheshire Constabulary and Spanish authorities traced Christopher Guestmore Jr. to Malaga. CCTV footage confirmed his presence. Financial records linked him to properties under false names. An international arrest warrant was issued. Extradition proceedings began. Guestmore Jr. fought the process, filing appeals, claiming mistaken identity, arguing that evidence had degraded over 16 years. Spanish courts rejected his appeals. December 2019, he was extradited to the United Kingdom. December 2021, Christopher Guestmore Jr. stood trial at Chester Crown Court. The evidence remained overwhelming. Surveillance records from June 2003 placed him at the Waters family home in Nantwich, tracking Gavin's vehicle to Burnt House Farm. DNA recovered from the crime scene matched samples taken upon his arrest. Testimony from co-conspirators confirmed his role in planning and executing the operation. His 16-year fugitive status was presented as consciousness of guilt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days. Guilty on all counts: murder of Brian Waters, attempted murder of Suleiman Razak, conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. Sentencing: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 24 years before eligibility for parole. The final piece of the Brian Waters case fell into place. 4 men convicted: Suleiman Razak, Gavin Waters, Natalie Waters and Julie Waters attended the sentencing hearing. Justice, delayed but delivered. But 3 attackers, the men who wielded the canes, fired the staples, administered the shocks, have never been named. They remain ghosts in the case file, unknown and unpunished. Brian Waters was remembered by those who knew him as a devoted father who would give the shirt off his back to help someone in need. His entry into the cannabis trade was born of desperation, not ambition. A man whose body had failed him, whose options had narrowed, who made choices that seemed survivable until they weren't. His wife Julie, son Gavin, and daughter Natalie were forced to witness his final moments. The psychological trauma is lifelong. Trust shattered, innocence stolen, memories colonized by violence. Therapy can manage symptoms, but it cannot erase what they saw. Suleiman Razak survived, but carries permanent physical injuries: nerve damage from electrical shocks, scarring from chemical burns, chronic pain from fractured bones that didn't heal properly. The psychological scars run deeper. He has never spoken publicly about the attack. The community of Nantwich and surrounding Cheshire was left reeling. The brutality was unprecedented in the region. Not a spontaneous act of rage, but a calculated, multi-day operation designed to terrorize. Burnt House Farm became a symbol of how far debt, reputation, and criminal pride can escalate when left unchecked. A £20,000 customs seizure, a refusal to pay, and a crime boss who needed to prove a point. The cost was measured in destroyed lives, not money. John Wilson, James Raven, Otis Matthews, and Christopher Guestmore Jr. remain in prison, each serving life sentences with 24-year minimum terms. The earliest parole eligibility begins in the late 2020s. David Moran, the lookout who made the 999 call, received a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony. His current status is not publicly detailed. The Waters family has largely stayed out of the public eye, seeking privacy after decades of trauma. The case stands as a stark reminder. In the criminal underworld, debts aren't financial instruments, they're personal affronts. And when pride meets desperation, the cost is measured in lives, not money. John Wilson, James Raven, Otis Matthews, and Christopher Guestmore Jr. remain in prison. But 3 attackers were never identified, and likely never will be. If UK cases like this, built on verified court records and told without sensationalism, matter to you, Subscribing helps us continue examining stories where justice took 16 years and still feels incomplete. We'd value your thoughts below, shared respectfully.